When you've written a book, you want to be positioned as a person of authority, but you also need to build credibility so that people can respect your level of authority. And that's why public relations is incredibly important, getting the right kind of media exposure. But it's not like magic, this thing that just happens. You actually have to have a process to go through. So today I'm going to be speaking to Margaret Naidoo from Amani Reputation Management, who's going to speak to us about reputation management, how to work with reputation management companies, and a couple of little inside secrets. So over to you, Margaret. Welcome to the Right Learn and Earn.
Thank you so much for having me.
So reputation management, tell us what that actually means.
The main thing is building trust. So if I see you in something like Business Day, I immediately trust you because no one's going to publish something on Business Day that's not factual. A lot of it has to do with trust, building your reputation. Yeah.
Excellent. Now, we've had a little bit of experience working together, and some of my other authors have worked with your company as well. One of the big disconnects that I find is what authors' expectations are and what they actually experience in the market. And so I often say that, writing a book is like having a baby. You have a lot of passion and energy that goes into it. But like when babies are born, sometimes your baby arrives and you think it's the most beautiful thing in the whole world. And everyone is all gaga about this baby. And then other people who are not actually involved, they're like, oh, actually your baby is quite ugly, because they come out all squished and they don't really look that great. And so sometimes I think as authors, we've got that kind of expectation. We have this wonderful book and everyone is going to love it as much as we do. And that's where the disconnect comes in. So what does a reputation management company do when it comes to that? And what does a client services manager do? How do they manage those expectations?
That's a very good question. We can't expect media to love your book. In fact, we have really good relationships with media, so we don't always pay for their services. In fact, we sometimes just write a statement or an article and we send it through to them because we have built that reputation and that trust that what we send to you is credible, it's written well, so you don't really have to tweak it that much. And we know our clients. So I think a lot of it is we have to get to know you as a client, know what your story is, your brand is. That'll help us a lot. And then also understanding we're not going to give your book to a journalist and then they're going to read it and be like, oh my gosh, I love it, I want you on my channel like right now. It's not really about that. We will probably read your book and we will pick points out of it. We'll get to know you as a client, pick things that we think work well for your brand, and then we'll pitch it to media. So it's kind of understanding our processes and that it's not a marketing thing. It's building trust, showing the journalists that you know what you're talking about, you're the experts, and that's how we position you. And that's how we end up getting radio and television and articles out there.
You've made a very clear distinction. It's not marketing, it's reputation management. And I think that that's what we struggle with as authors, because we've introduced so much money, invested so much money into this book. Like there's the cover design, there's the editing, there's all of these things. And so we wanted to make money. We want to make money now. So when you go to a reputation management company or PR company, we have to, as authors, realize the distinction between marketing activities and public relations. So what do you say to someone for them to understand that distinction?
Yeah, I think I alluded to it earlier with the building the trust. We're making the media see that you're the expert. So I think it is important to also have, like we have clients who have their own marketing companies, and sometimes we do collaborate. We work hand in hand. But ours is just mainly about building that trust, making sure that people know who you are. Because if I see you in a media house and then I meet you, I'm like, oh my goodness, you're on television, you're on radio, you must know what you're talking about, right? So I think it sometimes does overlap a little bit with marketing. Like we also do social media for our clients, so there can be some form of marketing in there, but our main focus is trust, reputation, that positioning you as an expert.
And so getting into media, so let's just speak about the press releases. Because, like again with the baby analogy, I'm very excited about what I've written and what it means. But journalists are looking for something different. They don't work for us and they don't actually work for you. So, how do we entice them? How do we make them interested in what it is that we have to say?
Yeah. So PR is storytelling, and you're an author, so you're an expert in storytelling, but so are we, and we have a different kind of storytelling. It's also important to know your audience. So if you're writing about crime or whatever, you have to look for people who are invested in crime. If you're writing about romance, you have to find people who like romance. So it kind of depends on your genre. If you're into mental health, we look for mental health publications, people who talk about that kind of stuff. If you're into business, we're looking for business publications like Business Day or something, or IOL or SABC kind of thing. SABC for like politics or whatever. So if you're looking, you have to know your audience. And then we will have a conversation. I think it's really important to set some time with us so that we can understand who you are, what your book is about, your brand is about, because then we can help make those distinctions. We will go look into the media and say, wow, it's mental health month. Let's chat about that. But everyone's talking about mental health, so why don't we kind of tweak it, Not everyone knows about postpartum depression, so let's talk about that. So yeah, I think it's understanding your audience, understanding your brand, and helping us learn about your brand.
So, I want to speak a little bit about the magicians. So what I found is, and we found this in ghostwriting. So someone will come to a ghostwriter and they'll say, here, I want you to write my book. And they kind of half imagine that that person is going to be able to know all of your experiences, that thing that you did when you were a child that really transformed you. And now all of a sudden you think completely differently. But a ghostwriter doesn't actually know that. They don't know anything about your history. And I think in PR, you sometimes have that struggle as well, is they think you're a magician. Tell us how that pans out.
So you're the expert in your brand, and we're the expert in our business. We know what media likes, but we don't know anything about you because we're not in writing books. It's very different to writing a press statement. So we want to actually hear what your brand is about. And what I do it with a lot of my clients is I'll say 20 to 30 minutes with them because some of my clients have different products. So then I'll say, okay, I don't really know about this product. Let's have a little meeting quickly. You tell me a little bit what's happening in your area of expertise. And then I'll usually come with my own research. I'll say, okay, I know in the media this and this and this is happening around it, but I need to know your expertise because I can't read your mind, like you said. And then what we'll do is we'll find a really good angle to pitch to media with it. And we'll write the article for you. We'll send it to you. You can have a look, say, okay, I'm positioned well, I like that. Or maybe I want to change one or two stats or whatever. And then we'll send it out to media. And yeah, that's our process. But I think it's making sure you understand that process because you're the expert. And you need to remember that you're the expert in what you're talking about. We're the expert in what we're talking about. And we need to marry those two expectations.
And speaking about marriage, that's also very interesting because in a way, when you work with a reputation management company, it is like dating. There are certain things that you only discover about each other later on down the line.
Yeah.
So I think that when authors are too rushed, when they're expecting results immediately, then it's a bit of a disconnect because you're not like dating. You expect this person to be your soulmate, but they actually don't even know anything about you.
Yeah, that's very important. We like to give 3, maybe 6 months, up to 6 months, time frame for us to actually work because when you start, especially if you're a new upcoming kind of client, you've just started writing your book or whatever, you're not like a big brand that everyone's gonna know, like Checkers, for example. Everyone knows that. So as soon as we start doing PR for you, people are gonna just know, right? But if you're a new brand like yourself, for example, media first needs to get to know you first. If we're just sending them stuff, they're like, who's this? Do I really want to work with them? I don't know anything about them. So what we actually like to do is set up media meets and greets, is what we call them. So we'll do something that we think is speaks to you, but is really fun for the journalist. And then they'll get to know you. There's no expectations attached to it, but they get to know you, your brand. And then when we do send them something, it's not a surprise. It's not, who's this person? It's, oh, I spoke to this person. I know who they are. I know what their brand is.
So I know that you told me this really interesting story about a gin tasting
Yes.
that you organized for one of your clients. Obviously, we're not going to mention that client's name over here. But why was the gin tasting a good idea?
So this was a new client we had taken on at the time. The media didn't really know them. They had been in the media, but they weren't very well known. And so we wanted to break the ice a little bit, get them to know each other. So they have a beautiful view at their offices. Like, you can see the sunset, it's beautiful. And we knew that this journalist liked gin, and this company has their own gin brand. So they went to visit and they had a great time, and then they knew each other then. So when we sent them press statements, it wasn't a shock, like I mentioned, and it worked out pretty well. We had a couple more. There was one with whiskey tasting as well, and we've had a couple. I think they even did a racetrack one. But I think it's important to do media meets and greets that the journalists will enjoy. Thankfully, we have relationships with them already, so we know a little bit about them. But it is a little bit like internet stalking. Sometimes you have to try and figure out what is this journalist like, just to try and get that relationship.
Excellent. So that leads me to my next question. As authors, sometimes we don't have the budget that a big corporate would have. So maybe we can't do a gin tasting as much as we would love to.
Yeah.
What are other things that you can do when you've got a client that's got a smaller budget? How important is it to be innovative, to come up with interesting ideas when people don't actually know who you are?
Journalists are very busy and they've got tight deadlines and such. So now you're expecting them to come meet you, and they already have in the back of their mind, this person wants me to write something about them. They're probably expecting me to do something. And now it's just a little bit of a drag. But if it's something fun that they don't always get to do, like racing or I mean, obviously you don't have a budget for that, but you do have to think about your brand, what's going to speak to your brand, and something that's fun. Because now I have to get out away from my work. I have to put on my makeup. I have to dress nicely, and I have to be sociable to you, knowing in the back of my head, you probably want something from me. So it should be fun. Some of our clients have had prominent people come over. I know not everyone has a budget for that, but it is something that journalists like, or something that's groundbreaking, something that hasn't been spoken about, or even if you're speaking about something that has been, tweak it a little bit so that it's more interesting, a perspective that they haven't heard before. But more importantly, do something that's fun for them.
So I think in that case, the venue of having your book launch would be really important, because yes, we want to do the big book brands, we want to go into the bookstores, those kinds of things are really important. But if you have a novel venue and you have an interesting activity, that might take a smaller group. You don't have to have a book launch as like 500 people. But if it's fun, then the journalist would say, oh, it's something different. I'd like to have that experience.
Yeah. And also keeping in mind that not every journalist is going to come. Not everyone wants to be involved in that. So managing the expectations of how many people are actually going to come, because sometimes our clients say, I want every journalist in the area, bring them all. We all have deadlines. We have jobs. We're writing articles and stuff. So you'll probably get one, if you're lucky, two. And then we'll probably be there with you to try and help manage that relationship, because like I said, we have the relationship with them and we're going to introduce them to you.
And I think also with authors, the challenge that we have is the things that we like to talk about, but maybe the media doesn't want to talk about it. So I remember that we had an author that came through one of our programs who actually did work with you. And there was one specific aspect of her book that people asked to speak about time and time again. It wasn't the reason that the book was written, but it was in there and it was really, really topical. The business, there was one station that actually asked her to come back twice. She got 13 minutes of media time.
Which is very rare, my lad. I mean, an interview is usually 2 to 3 minutes at the most, if you're lucky.
I think the best I've ever gotten was 10 minutes, got a 10-minute interview. And then actually I got a 45-minute interview, but that was for a a whole lifestyle kind of channel. But 10 minutes is generally what you get. And then they still have ad breaks in between.
But like I said, 10 minutes is even rare itself. I mean, usually if we're getting an interview request, it's 2 to 3 minutes. They're slotting you in during one quick minute in the morning or in the evening. So those 10 minutes ones, when you have them, you got to take them.
One of the other things that I wanted to speak to you about is I know that Amani Reputation Management does interviews for their clients, their mock-up interview.
Yes.
And I sat in on one of those. They're actually a heck of a lot of fun. But how do you manage a client's expectations? How do you prep them for going into a media interview?
Our CEO, Sringakari, he manages the theory aspects, and he's actually very intelligent when it comes to these things. He used to work as a journalist. He does the theory section. He talks about like what media likes, what they don't like, do's and don'ts. And then we'll usually run a theory section, which we have a guest speaker for, and it'll usually be a proper interviewer to prepare them. And then what we'll do, I do a lot of it as well, is I'll do feedback sessions with you. So we'll watch your interview, we'll get to know you first. So we'll send a list of questions, or not questions, sorry. We'll send a paragraph of who you are, what you do, and then our guest speaker reads through, prepares some questions. And then it's like an interview just like this with the lights and the cameras and the speakers and everything. So you're a little bit on the spot there. And then we'll watch you and we'll provide some feedback with you afterwards. We do a couple of them with some people, especially your crisis team, because they need to be prepped and ready to go at the drop of a hat. It's very fun and it really puts you to the test.
So tell me, I know that in these sessions, I've heard you give feedback to people who are doing the interview. What are some typical mistakes that people make in an interview?
That's a very good question. I mean, dressing for one, a lot of men tend to wear like very stripy or like shirts that really mess with the camera. But I think some of the other ones is, I mean, I'm at fault here because I haven't mentioned Amani enough, but we'll often say mention your company as much as possible. And just because you're getting this airtime, and if you're lucky, it's for free because you wrote something that they loved. So just get your brand out there as much as possible. I think those are like some of the most common mistakes, but also going into the interview prepared, because sometimes you go in there and you don't know what you're talking about at all, and then you're stuttering and umming, and it just looks a little bit unprofessional.
So I know that this kind of information is really valuable because some of my clients have gotten into exclusive books, and to get in there, you actually have to have a marketing plan. You've got to be able to show that you've got some PR behind you. So those kinds of things are really, really important. So on final words, what kind of advice would you give to our authors in terms of prepping to work with reputation management companies?
Knowing your brand well, knowing exactly what you want to get across, because usually there's just like a main key message, and we even say this with our media training. There's that one key message that you really want to get across. Get that main message across in many different ways. So understanding your brand, what your main message is that you want to get across, is actually very, very beneficial. And just allowing us to do the work, allow the professionals to do the work. Yeah.
Allow the professionals to do the work. So thank you so much for watching the Write, Learn and Earn show. Please remember to subscribe to get notifications to make sure you find out the next thing that's going to happen in your career as an author. And remember, your credibility matters, your reputation matters. So don't leave it to chance.